Good evening all, and welcome. People come and go through our lives at an impressive rate, and I'm sure there are some that we wish would go along a little bit faster, that perhaps we wish we could forget, but that are unwilling to forget us. So get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. This happened about 5 years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was living in a new state, and I wanted to mingle with the singles. So I set up an account on OkCupid. I matched with this guy Justin, who had just moved to the area, and we decided to get dinner at a local bar. Dinner was great. Justin was great. He was ridiculously tall, standing at 6'6", and very country. He was a breath of fresh air from all the hipsters in town, and I was already making plans to see him again. We walked around downtown a bit after dinner, and he invited me back to his place for drinks. I agreed to let him drive me in his truck, as I had been drinking and didn't feel comfortable driving my own car. We get back to his place, and I decide to check out his basement. I had never seen one before, while he makes us some drinks upstairs. Okay, I was pretty naive. We go upstairs to his room, drinks in hand, and we're sitting on his bed, talking about his experience in the military, and Justin is still just being a super nice and sweet guy. But he then starts to get really pushy about me finishing my drink. As I bring the glass up to my mouth, I notice some pink powder at the bottom. I put it back to study it, thinking that the cup was dirty. He watches me look at it and says, "Oh no, I only use that cup for water, it's fine." I take a sip of the drink, and it was extremely bitter, like when you let a pill linger in your mouth for a bit too long. My gut instinct was to pour it out, but he kept insisting I drink, so I kept taking tiny little baby sips so that I didn't appear rude. Curious about his military experience, I asked him if he's killed anyone while he was deployed, and his whole face lit up like Christmas. Hell yeah, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Then he proceeds to tell me about it. At this point, I started to get really uncomfortable and wanted to leave. I couldn't just leave though because I didn't have my car. And he then tells me that even back home in Montana, he's done some things because things happen in the country, and it's a place where the law doesn't always hold up. I'm starting to feel a little spacey from the drink, so I put it down and tell him I'm not really interested in it anymore. He asks me what my greatest fear is, and I tell him, and he responds with, "Oh, that's weird. Most women fear being assaulted by someone they've just met." I didn't know what to say, but he laughed it off and switched back to nice guy Justin. We're having a normal conversation about life, and I decide to lay down on his bed where I find a gun under his pillow. Cue Scary Justin. He tells me that it's only there for protection, but that he would love to screw a woman at gunpoint someday. He grabs the gun and starts playing with it, and I'm convinced that this is the day that I'm going to die. Yes, it took all of this before I felt this way because his roommates were home when I got there, so I'd felt safe. He proceeds to tell me that his absolute greatest fantasy is to kidnap a random woman and keep her as a slave for devious activities, and then to end her. I don't even question it, because he's basically at climax just thinking about it. I feel helpless and terrified. I notice my phone is dying and start thinking of an escape plan. I wasn't sure that my puny 5'4" self would be able to successfully fight off his muscular 6'6" military experience. He lays down next to me, starts to touch me, and I go completely frozen in fear. I guess at some point his roommates left because we heard them walking through the front door and up the stairs. His whole demeanor goes cold. He stands up and says that he's taking me back to my car. I'd never felt more grateful in my life when I saw my car sitting in front of the bar. I drove around town for a while to make sure he wasn't following me, and promptly blocked and deleted all his contact info. In hindsight, I should have probably alerted the authorities, but I figured it wouldn't have gone anywhere with no evidence of wrongdoing. I'll be glad to never lay eyes on him again, and can only hope that his greatest fantasy is never lived out. Over the summer, my friend and I got a call from another friend who asked us if we were up for an adventure, so naturally we agreed. Our friend wouldn't tell us what this adventure was until we had already gotten into the car and were on our way. He laid out the plan to us. We were going to break into a cabin to meet a boy he met on Tinder. The area was pretty familiar to us, and we were already mid-route, so we were down. We drove up this long driveway to get to the cabin that was isolated enough for us to not get caught, but not to the point it was concerning or out of self-service. The boy we were meeting up with walks into the driveway and breaks into the cabin as we wait outside for him to open the front door. My friends immediately start exploring the cabin and going into all the rooms, but I was feeling uneasy and stood in the kitchen. The boy we had met went into one of the other rooms, and my friends returned to the kitchen with me. Tinder Boy walks back out of the kitchen carrying a shotgun and 2 rounds he had retrieved from wherever he had gone. He starts pointing the gun around, and I immediately begin yelling at him and asking him what the hell he thought he was doing. After scaring the piss out of us all, he just laughed and put the gun on the kitchen table. Seeing that we were uncomfortable, he tells us to follow him into the basement, to which we all reluctantly agree. In the basement, we begin telling stories to break the ice and try to get to know what this boy's deal is. As he tells his own story, he pulls out his pocket knife and starts throwing it around and sticking it into the wooden support posts, bringing back the anxiety in me. He then says he's bored of the basement and brings us back up to the kitchen, where he then steals alcohol from underneath the sink. He offers us all drinks, but my friend and I are more of the smoking type, and didn't want to get caught, so we declined. We all roll up and then head to the porch. On the porch, my friends and I are all standing there smoking along the rail, as he sat back behind the table. I got a weird feeling, so I turn around to find him taking pictures of us. This made me feel really uncomfortable. So I ask him what he's doing, and all he responds with was another laugh. My friends and I all share a "what the hell" look, and after having a few drinks, he goes around back to relieve himself. My friends and I convene to share our uneasiness and decide we need to get out of there ASAP. He comes back, and we had all made our way to the other side of the porch to distance ourselves from him. I look over again and find him taking yet another set of pictures of us. At this point, I can't handle the anxiety, so I text my friend to fake a text from her gram so we had a reason to leave. She fakes the text and we go inside to pack up our stuff. As we're packing up, he grabs the shotgun and waves it at all of us one more time before putting it back. My one friend leaves a handful of change on the table as evidence in case the boy tries to strike and pull some stuff, and this is slightly relevant later. So, our stuff was all gathered, and we were all more than ready to leave. We walk outside and head towards the car, when the Tinder boy pulls my friend aside, explaining to him that he needs a ride back because he had a curfew. Because my friend was interested in this boy, although I still can't figure out why, he agreed to drive the Tinder boy home. The whole car ride I'm preparing myself to defend with a knife, which thankfully never happened. We drop him off, and a wave of relief washed over me. I'm glad I'd never have to see this psychopath again. But fast forward a few months, I'm visiting home over Thanksgiving break, and my friends told me he had showed up to their jobs. They said that he pulled them aside and told them that if anyone were to ask, we had never went into that cabin and didn't know it had existed. I'm assuming the owner noticed the pile of change on the table and missing alcohol, and had alerted the police about it, but I'll never know for sure. Though ominous and bizarre, I just kind of laughed it off, what they had told me, because I now live 4 hours away. Months pass, and I'm currently on my spring break and visiting home. A different set of friends and I decide to go to one of the local thrift stores, as I needed a fitting room, and I go up to one of the employees and ask for one when he turns around, and it was the Tinder boy. My heart sunk, and anxiety washed over me. He walked me over and didn't say a word. I think my drastic hair change may have thrown him off. Thank God. This originally started with my psycho ex having a psycho family. We were young. He knew his family was psycho, which led him to moving out/running away from home to live with a friend, without telling his parents. So he packs up his stuff one night and leaves. I knew what he was doing and where he was going, which was not my house. I woke up the next day to his entire British family, mum, dad and grandmother, in my front yard, yelling at my house, telling me I was going to rot in hell where I belong, and that I'm a worthless, horrible and disgusting maggot of a girl. Eventually, my mum came out of the house and shooed them away and told them to get off our yard. We thought this was kind of a one-time thing. Obviously, because what the hell? Why would you do that to a 16-year-old? A few days later, I was with the boyfriend and some friends downtown hanging out. We see his mum's car coming towards us and he starts running away. So me and the other friends all just kind of split up and start quickly walking away down different little side streets. Somehow the mum pulls a U-turn and follows me. I call my mum and ask her if she can come and get me. Hey mum, Susan is following me. I'm on City Avenue and I'm scared. She keeps driving really fast behind me and then slowing down, and while I'm on the phone with my mum, I hear the car revving up so fast, and then she swerves across someone's driveway and almost runs me over. She starts yelling at me, screaming about what a terrible person I am, and I manage to kind of run away from her and get to somewhere that my mum can pick me up. After the car incident, my mum made me wear a disguise whenever I left the house. The family kept coming and yelling on the yard, and I had to get a restraining order against 3 adults as a 16-year-old. About a month later, we were staying over at the friend's house where the boyfriend lived. We woke up in the morning to a lot of chaos. His father was outside the window of his first-floor apartment, banging on the window, screaming, "I know you're in there." He then sees me through the window and starts calling me all kinds of colourful names and other really pleasant things. I duck into the bathroom to call the police, because A, this is a disturbance, and B, it's terrifying. And finally, I have a restraining order against this man, and he's breaking it. While I'm in the bathroom, my friends turn on some really loud music to drown out the man's yelling. The police finally come and get him to leave, basically. A lot more smaller drama happens over the few months, and my boyfriend goes to visit his cousin for a weekend, disappears for a week, and was actually staying with a girl, got her pregnant, didn't tell me, broke up with me, and then came back with no explanation why. I found out 10 months later that this guy has an entire baby. I'm over this guy by now, so all I can think of is, okay, that's just karma. A few years down the line, I hear from a bunch of people about some guy at a university 4 hours away that did a bunch of acid in the library and climbed on a desk and claimed to be a god, and threw a bunch of chairs around. Even later down the road, I found out that this guy was my ex. My life is seriously a roller coaster. A few years ago, I was down on my luck in the relationship scene. My girlfriend of 3 years had just broken up with me because she had started dating her boss, and I came to find out that it had been going on for the last 2 years. Isn't that just peachy? Anyway, I joined Tinder, something I'm not proud of, and I tried to connect with a whole bunch of girls, in the hopes that I can at least find someone decent while I'm feeling down. Don't get me wrong, I'm not looking for a quick hookup, but I really wanted someone to fill that void from the previous relationship. I wanted someone to love. That's when I connected with Kimberly. She seemed very nice during the messages, and we lived very close to each other. Too close, in fact. And we agreed to meet up at a local restaurant a week ahead. I was getting very excited. We were always messaging, and within a very short space of time, it started to feel really serious. We went on our date and got on very well. And before long, she started telling me that she loved me. Now, I'm not sure how other people feel about this, but to me, it's a very big deal to admit this, and I certainly wasn't in a position to say it back to her, something which she took very badly. She asked why I didn't say it back, and me being the straight-up guy, told her that I just wasn't feeling the same way, but that if she would let our relationship grow and nurture, I'm sure that in time I'd feel the same way, and that people move on at different rates and yada yada. She was very unhappy, but in her credit, tried her best to not make me feel uncomfortable, and we carried on with our date that night. A few weeks later, things had heated up a bit more. We were moving on into the next level, if you know what I mean, and she ended up staying over at my place that night. I woke up at about 3 a.m. to use the toilet, and when I look, she's not in bed with me. Now, this being the first time we've done the nasties, I wondered if she'd just gone home. I wasn't entirely sure of the parameters of this with her. So, I look around, and she's nowhere to be seen on the top floor. I go down the stairs, and the smell of fire catches my nostrils. I look outside into my garden, and she's taken this metal bin and started a fire. I run up to her and ask her what the hell she's doing, and she is burning loads of my things. She looks at me with this cold, dead stare and says, "You can't have any of this. That's why you don't love me, because you keep things that she gave you in the house." I was absolutely horrified. I don't even know where she made this assumption from. Things like my CDs, DVDs, hell, even my iPhone, and a whole bunch of other stuff were now melting away in this fire. I was horrified, and I told her that she needed to go and that I was calling the police and the fire department. The fire was put out pretty quickly, and I never spoke to her again. She definitely had several screws loose, and I hope that no other man falls for her madness. So, this started about 3 years ago, when I was about 18. I was using Grindr, and someone called Rando messaged me. We started talking with the usual conversation starters. How are you? What are you up to? And then Rando began to sound rather depressed. He was moaning about his insecurities and how everyone hated him, and occasionally talking about how he should just end it all. Me being the nice person that I am, I try finding something about him that I could compliment on, and try to make him feel better, that sort of thing. or bring a smile at the least, and that's when things began to get heavy. Rando began deflecting my compliments, calling me a liar or a user, and saying that I'm just trying to make fun of him. I tried my best to reassure him that my compliments were genuine, because I hate seeing people depressed or down. It's just in my nature to bring joy to people. Now, I have been in his shoes before, with severe insecurities, so I know how he felt. After he finally began to believe that my compliments were real, he started to get very attached to me, and started berating me with messages. He'd send me 20 in one go, and if I didn't reply within about 5 seconds, he'd be like, "Oh, I guess you found someone better to talk to. You're like all the rest." And it began to get frustrating at this point. Now, I could have just blocked him and saved me from the headache, but I have anxiety and feared that he'd turn up at my door someday and do something drastic if I blocked him. He also tried sending me nudes to grab my attention when I didn't reply, literally instantly to his messages, and it got worse and worse from here. Eventually, he told me he'd be in my town over the weekend and began to get very pushy about meeting up somewhere and doing some things. I didn't reply. He flips out and started finding me on different social medias to keep tabs on me. Facebook messages, friend requests, Instagram follows. I went out on a night out with some friends of mine, and at the time forgot he was in town over the weekend, and he saw me walking down the street and ran up to me, bawling his eyes out about me trying to avoid him, and began begging for my phone number and house address and whether he could join us on our night out. And when we politely refused, he followed us further and tried forcing drinks into my hand when we got to the bar. Infuriated by how clingy he was being, I went home, just to realize he boarded the same bus as me and followed me back to my place before he finally vanished. He started messaging me on Grindr about how he was going to visit me someday, and tried to find my friends in order to get my phone number. I finally snapped at this point and blocked him and thought I was done with him. This whole experience has really put me off dating people with severe insecurities out of fear that something like this would happen again, and I've been trying to go against my nature and avoid complimenting people too much, to avoid something like this again. It's been 3 years, and I haven't seen him since. Preface. When I was around 13, me and my best friend were really into the Fear Street and Goosebumps novels by R.L. Stine. Being the really dramatic goth/emo/punk teenagers we were at the time, we really wished something interesting, meaning scary, could happen in our own lives. How stupid of me. My best friend and I somehow got into a friendship group of all guys, all around 16 to 18 from the next town over. They were really nice and we had lots of fun every time we met, like once or twice a week and on the weekends. For this story, only Dick and Stuart are relevant. Dick was a tall blonde guy that had ADHD, was a weapon enthusiast, and drove a Vespa around town. Stu was more of the shy and quiet types, and we were good friends for a brief time. This all happened over the age of MSN and MySpace, so a lot of contact was held over chats. When my best friend and I first started hanging out with this group of guys, everything was alright. Being not very girly ourselves, I think we were seen as one of the guys pretty quickly, instead of being somebody's girlfriend anytime soon. But over the time of summer, Dick and I got really close, and before the school started again, he confessed that he really liked me. I wasn't into him at first, but being a teenager overflowing with hormones, one thing led to another, and we ended up dating within the week. He was my first real boyfriend, and I was pretty excited at first. Our romance only lasted a week though, and the aftermath several months. To get to the point, I ended the relationship after 7 days, because he was just too intense for my liking. After 3 days of chatting a lot and making out only once at his place, he told me about a dream he had, which went something like this. I dreamed that I was meeting you in the city. When you were walking up to me, I was surprised at first because you were holding the hand of a small boy who was walking right next to you. As you were walking closer, I began to realize that he was our kid. He had my hair but your face, and your eyes especially. I was so happy and gave you two a huge hug before I woke up. Being 13, I was pretty shocked to hear something like this from my boyfriend of 3 days. After giving him an answer like, "You know I'm only 13, and not thinking about having kids right now, right?" The matter soon resolved in him saying, "Don't worry, I just wanted to tell you about this dream." And we changed the subject. A few days later, and another date at his house, he and I landed on his bed making out. At first it was harmless teenage kissing, but he soon indicated that he wanted to go full throttle. I said no, and he asked again a bit more, and then more insistently. I refused again, and he got visibly upset, and I went home and had to rethink this relationship. The next day I felt really uncomfortable chatting with him, and decided that I really was not into him at all, and rather not be in a relationship with him. We met on the weekend with our group of friends, and I took him aside and spoke to him. He was sad, but said he wanted to remain friends, to which I agreed. We hugged goodbye, and we went home. I explained to the others what happened, and they all took it without further questions, and we moved on. He mentioned a few times since the breakup that he was still really hung up on me, and that I should give him another chance. I explained constantly that I didn't feel this way, and he shut up about it for a few days before we spoke of it again. I don't really remember how much time passed, but it must have been a few weeks or months of this behavior. It all escalated when one day, while just casually hanging out, some other friends of the guy joined our shared group, and along with them came Stu. We all always hung out together, with nobody just having private hangouts or anything. But I assume seeing me and Stu having a good time while out with everybody, Dick started to get really jealous. His demeanor changed, and he became mad and aggressive more often than usual. He tried to talk crap about Stu behind his back to me via MSN, and all in all just really acted aggressively towards him and me. I really had nothing going on with Stu, so I was really confused and annoyed, and he would attack me verbally more often on these days. He even threatened to end it all, or me, if I wouldn't be with him. These threats upset me a lot, and I tried to talk to a school counselor about it, as I felt threatened by him, but she seemed overwhelmed by this too, and just told me to ignore him. I didn't tell my mother, and my dad was AFK since I was 8, because she and I were not having the best relationship at the time, and I kept all that stuff to myself. One fateful evening though, Dick chatted with me about Stu, and told me again that he still had feelings for me, and did not want to date anybody else. I was fed up with this by now, and told him off that it's none of his business who I date, and that I do not feel the same way about him. This argument heated up pretty quickly, as he sent me a corny message like this: "If I can't have you, nobody will." At first I cringed, but as he logged off from the messenger afterwards, I became worried. What was he up to? I was also chatting with another shared friend at the time, and asked him if Dick was just offline, as it was possible in MSN to be seen as offline, but still actually be online, and being able to chat with people. He responded, "No, he said something about getting his gun," and left. Now I was really upset. I knew that he had a rifle and a few guns at home. Now I think these might have been just air guns, but what did I know? Because as I said, he was really into weapons. But I did not know how dangerous he could be. I asked the friend if he thought Dick could be dangerous, and he replied again. He seemed pretty upset. "If I were you, I wouldn't go outside tonight." I panicked and called my best friend. She freaked out and told her parents, as mine weren't at home. I was a latchkey kid, to which her father offered to come over if I felt unsafe, and they lived right next door. I didn't want to make a scene and told him thanks and that I'd call if I was scared. I spent the rest of the evening on the phone with my best friend and sitting by our front window watching the street and hoping to not hear any moped or Vespa driving by. Around 10 p.m, I saw Dick approaching our neighborhood fast on his Vespa. I screamed into the phone that he was here. Terrified, I just kept on watching the street and hoping he would leave. But Dick stopped a few houses down on a parking lot and got off his Vespa. I could not see in the dark if he had a gun or rifle with him, but I was scared nonetheless. For a few minutes nothing happened. He just waited there and seemingly stared up at our house, and I was staring down at him. Then my best friend's dad came out of their house and walked up to Dick and engaged him in conversation. I later was told that he asked him to leave and to not return, that I did not want to see him ever again, and if he returned, that the police would be called. This seemed to be all it took, as Dick drove off into the night and her father returned home. I asked him later if Dick had a gun, to which he replied, "Don't worry about it." I still don't know if that was a yes or no. The whole thing was resolved pretty anticlimactically. Dick left me alone for a few days and didn't show up for a few weeks to our hangouts. My best friend and I soon moved on to another friendship group, and we all lost touch with Dick and the other guys. I've met Dick a handful of times after that, but I've always tried to avoid him and we've never spoken. I'm not superstitious at all, but I learned from this experience and never made wishes like having a more interesting life again. I met this friend online the summer before my junior year of high school. I was 16. His name was Flip. We clicked pretty instantly. Our senses of humor matched up, and I felt like we were really good friends. He was a guy, I a girl, but I never held any romantic feelings. Also, I was in a relationship. When I was 16, he was 19. I could tell he had romantic feelings, and let me know 6 months into our friendship that he loved me. We didn't really have a stable friendship, as he flipped out a lot and would go on extended amounts of time without talking to me. He told me it was because he couldn't bear to talk to me knowing we can't be together, because I was dating someone else. But I knew that it was more of a control thing, and he wanted to stop talking to me to make me feel like I'm missing something. He really hated women, really disliked women, and felt like most were just users. He told me he felt like I was different, that I was the only true woman he's ever met. Real red flag right there. I was young and didn't really think much of it. Our friendship was only online, instant messaging and FaceTiming. Now when we went on these tangents where he would abruptly stop talking to me, he would go on Twitter and make offensive, demonizing tweets about me to people, like awful stuff. When he came back, I just ignored that stuff, because he would return being funny and nice. So, he also had a habit of lashing out on people, taking revenge and just making people feel crappy for fun. Another red flag. But I thought I was special, and that he really cared about me and would never do anything like that to me. I remember leading up to my 18th birthday, with him being 21 now, and he said to me, "When you're 18, you're sending me nudes. You don't get to say no." I brushed it off because I knew I wouldn't. But yeah, notice there's just this element of him wanting to dominate. Fast forward 2 years later. I'm now 18, freshman in college. In October, I broke up with my boyfriend, the same guy as age 16, and Flip took that as an opportunity. He would tell me how he could not bear not seeing me, and that basically, we have to meet or it's all over. Now, I didn't really have romantic feelings for him. My love for him was platonic, but I figured I'll try the romance. I'll try to love him romantically. I couldn't lose him. So I impulsively bought a plane ticket to where he lives in December. My parents had no idea, and to this day, still don't. I was going to go away on a Friday and return for Monday. The college I go to is in a city with an airport, so it was just easy to get an Uber there. This romance that I'm trying to project feels real, and I genuinely felt like I loved him romantically. I was finally going to meet the guy I loved. Now, leading up to the flight, about a week or two before, I started getting cold feet. I was questioning the legitimacy of my feelings, and started getting on with a guy in a neighboring uni. I started catching feelings for him, and kissed him a day before my flight. At that point, I had already decided I didn't want to pursue Flip romantically, and figured, hey, we've been friends for 2 years. When I get there, I'll tell him I only want to stay friends. Yeah, he'll be upset, but I'm sure our friendship is worth more than that, and we're able to have a nice, enjoyable time. How naive was I? I decided to go on the trip anyway, thinking that maybe seeing him would reignite that fire. Upon arrival, I realized that I did not love him, and I was no longer attracted to him. Regardless though, he was a close friend of mine for a very long time, and whether I felt a romantic connection or not, I wanted to meet him for the sake of meeting him, just how I would for any internet friend. So it's time for the flight. It's very early. I remember sitting on the plane contemplating walking out. I really just wanted to leave and not return. I should have listened to my gut. I arrive, and I go outside of the terminal. I see him sitting in his car just staring at me, like a very malicious, piercing stare. After a few moments, he gets out the car. He looks different. It's strange because we have FaceTimed and I've seen pictures of him, but he just looks different. Kind of creepier. We hug and sit in the car. It's awkward. I feel awkward. We make small talk and awkward jokes, and in that moment, I wanted to be back in my dorm. We go back to his apartment, and we go up to his room. We smoke some weed, and I lay down on his bed. When I wake up, he's spooning me and trying to fondle me. I take his hands off and tell him to stop. Then I sit up and basically unload about how I don't want him romantically, but only as a friend. He just started crying and begging me to tell him that I loved him. I tell him that I can't do that. Then he stands up, stops crying, goes to the bathroom, and starts setting things on fire. It smells like burning paper in the bedroom now. He comes out normally and just sits on his computer and plays games without speaking to me. Now, the rest of the trip is just a combination of him being kind and normal to him being completely evil. Here's some of the things he did and said through the 3 days. He made jokes at me dying. He would pretend to hit me, like lunge at me, and get close enough to watch as I flinched. Told me he almost sent a snap of me to my mum with the geotag of his town so that I would get in trouble. Told me he almost made me sleep in the car one night. Told me that one night while I was sleeping, he walked over to me and started farting on me. This one's just nasty. He kept telling me to shut up when I would speak or ask him questions, and did that multiple times in front of his roommates. He was trying to feel me up in bed, and I kept pushing his hands away, and he would keep trying and would say things like, "I know you want it, you're just holding back." He'd call me an idiot when I would ask him questions, served me spaghetti, and he purposely used the moldy sauce hoping I would get sick. Told me he was going to make me miss my flight home, and said he was planning to drive in the opposite direction of the airport and dropping me off in the middle of nowhere. So basically I kept my cool, and when he would tell me these things I would nod and agree and laugh with him. But I was scared out of my wits. I wanted nothing more than to leave, so I kind of keep it cool and spend my time trying not to upset him. Monday rolls around, and my flight isn't until 8 p.m. At 11 a.m. he goes downstairs to leave, and in that time I pack my bag and leave without him knowing. My plan of action is to run to the nearest shopping plaza and Uber to the airport from there. I wasn't about to Uber from his house. I'm almost at the end of the street, feeling free, when I feel two arms come up from behind and wrap around me. He's hugging me, mumbles something into my ear, and then he turns around and dead sprints back down the street to his apartment. I ran to the shopping plaza, called an Uber, and got it. I felt so much relief in that moment. I felt like I was free. I waited at the airport with nothing to do for 8 hours, but it was better than being there. I looked back, and I feel like an idiot. Like I should have gone to a hotel, and I should have probably left. But I'm a broke college kid, and I was already scared being there without my parents' knowledge. After I left, I blocked him on every social media outlet I have, including LinkedIn. He's still tried to contact me regularly for the past 4 months, but luckily, I've never told him my address or anything, and I'd rather never meet him again. In the summer of 2012, I met my friend Tom at Dairy Queen for ice cream. He asked if his friend Ben could meet us there as well. Apparently, he had met Ben at the library where he was working at the time. I said, "Yeah, that's great, I love meeting new people." Ben comes with his guitar and starts playing beautifully. From this encounter, it seems like Ben is a really chill and down-to-earth guy. He then adds me on Facebook a few days later, and that's nothing out of the ordinary. And he starts making casual conversation. There are some strange things that arise though. When I met him, he had an accent that I couldn't put my finger on. He ended up telling me he was born and raised in the UK, and was a musician there until he moved to the US at age 18. I thought, okay, he really doesn't sound like he's from there, but alright. Around this time I started to date a guy called Kyle. Over the course of a few months, Ben is flirting with me a bit, and I try to make it obvious that I'm uninterested, and he seems to get the picture. At this point, the spring semester at college starts, and I find out Ben is in the same class as me, just at a different time. There's a class field trip to a museum where both classes are joined. I notice Ben and we make casual conversation. We go our own separate ways, and that's when things get weird. We were in a massive museum in New York City, yet I seemed to see Ben lurking everywhere I went. It really freaked me out, and by the time the trip was done, he messaged me going in pretty hard with the flirting all over again. I mentioned to him how I don't really like the way he's talking to me, but he still tried. I even ignored him at certain points. Why I didn't delete him at the time is beyond me, but I digress. I eventually just told my boyfriend and showed him the messages, and it gets even weirder. Kyle asked me what his name was. Then he saw his profile picture. He gasps and shouts, "Ben?" That's definitely not his name. I know the guy, he's called Steve. He went to our high school and he's insane. I'm in total shock right now because it just made everything so much creepier. Then Kyle tells me about how he tried to do the same thing to his ex-girlfriend. So basically, Steve contacted Kyle's ex-girlfriend while they were dating, fed her the same lies, flirted with her and stalked her. Apparently, Steve told Kyle's ex that his name was Peter, Kyle said that he nearly got into a fight with him, but Steve backed off and switched schools. Kyle asked if he could use my phone to message him, and at first I was reluctant, but Kyle showed me his yearbook and confirmed that literally everything was a lie. Honestly, I couldn't really believe Steve's whole backstory. But did I really have a reason to call him out on it or question it? I didn't really care until it got eerie, and I didn't want to instigate further stalking. Anyway, Cal messages him from my account. "Hey Steve, it's Kyle, remember me?" Then that's where Steve gets hostile. He starts losing his mind and getting very aggressive, adamantly denying that he is Steve, but is Ben. Kyle sends him photos of him from the yearbook and tells him to leave me alone. Steve says that he's going to contact the police for harassment and whatnot, and by the end of these absurd accusations, he just blocks Kyle and I on social media altogether. Steve got found out for the second time by the same guy for the same thing. I'm not sure if Steve just hates or is obsessed with Kyle and wants to try and steal his girl again. But whatever the case, this guy is straight up crazy. Who lies about their identity and is that stupid to go for the same guy's new girlfriend? I'm still blocked to this day, and hope to not meet you again, Steve. This happened about 5 years ago. I had just started a new job at a bank that I don't wish to name. And my trainer was a really nice guy. We got on really well, and through whatever reason, the other person that was supposed to be joining me on the training, who'd also got the same job as me, didn't actually turn up, so it was just me and him. We got on really well. He was funny, charming, and seemed to really like me. He started touching me gently, caressing my arms from time to time when I did something well, and I honestly enjoyed the attention. But I knew it was slightly inappropriate. Now, at my job, we have this messenger system that we use internally, and we'd always be chatting about non-related work stuff on there. There were times I was caught giggling in my cubicle and was worried that my manager would start asking questions or check my IT history, as they could do that. It wasn't before long that he asked me out, and I giddily accepted. It was only when we started having a romantic relationship did I realize how much of a creep he was. He was into some pretty hardcore BDSM stuff, something I have no interest in, and on the first date was very explicit on how he wanted to do these things on me. Yeah, not the best thing to say on a first date, as it was an instant turn-off. That, along with a whole load of other things, really started giving me bad vibes, especially when he asked if when I was younger, if I ever liked hurting animals, as when he'd always loved to take his grandfather's shotgun and try to shoot bunnies. He made a point to say, especially the baby ones, they're slower. Yeah, our date didn't last very long, and I faked that my crab wasn't very good, gave me a stomach upset, and got a taxi home. When I got back to the office the next day, I tried my best to cease all conversations with him, and made up some lame excuse about my manager tracking my internet activity and me needing to act more professionally. He wasn't very happy with this, and that's when the stalking started. He'd start following me to the bathroom to try and talk to me. He'd take his breaks at the same time as me, try to sit on the same table, and when I would run errands around town, he'd come out and try to talk to me on the way. I was getting very uncomfortable, and it was not pleasant at all. To cut a long story short, I ended up telling my manager everything, and the next day when I got to work, he wasn't there. Turns out I wasn't the only girl he'd tried this to, and they were fed up. He was fired, and I'm glad I never got to see him again. I hope I never have to again. This story happened when I was 20. I had just left university and never been in a serious relationship. Enter Brad. Brad was a charming and lovely fellow. We went on a few dates, and me being very naive made me think that he was perfect and the one. We hung out a whole load together and started to move our relationship to the next level, and I was very excited to see how things progressed with him. We were even talking about moving in not 3 months into our relationship. Then he started asking me weird questions about my finances. He wanted us to get a joint account. More importantly though, he wanted his name on my account, but refused to do the same for his, saying that he didn't earn anywhere near as much as me, and that if I loved him, we should be willing to share everything from now. I was actually buying into his bull, and I started the process of adding him to my accounts. And then I got an anonymous Facebook message from a girl. I can't remember the name, but she just sent me a few words and some pictures. She explained that he was his girlfriend, and that they had a baby together. The baby was very cute, and that he would take time out to go and work when actually he would be with me. I was absolutely disgusted. I think that he was just trying to take me for a fool and steal my money. I instantly blocked him and was so glad I didn't add him to any of my accounts, because I know if that message had not come in any sooner, would he have probably robbed me and left me, or who knows, he may have just played me and strung me along. I was very happy I found out when I did, but it put me off dating for a very long time, and I don't know if I'll ever be ready to take the plunge again. Nonetheless, I hope to never meet him again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed tonight's video, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. If you're new here, why not subscribe and press the bell icon for new stories every night? That'll be a pretty cool thing to do. If there's a story that you would like to be shared, feel free to send it to my email or drop it into my Reddit. All the info is available in the description. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.